Judith Sear, just back from California, where I saw Cassin's kingbird.
Oh, nice.
All right. Okay, so I think everyone's in. Well, I'm sure we'll get a few more as the evening goes. Jeff Humberger from Lakewood Ranch. Bald
Welcome, Jeff.
eagles near SMH. What's SMH?
Sarasota
Sarasota
Memorial
Memorial
Hospital.
Hospital.
Thank you.
You've been gone too long.
I'm a manatee person.
Yeah, that's true. There's a new eagle's nest at Benderson Park.
Really? Where?
When you go down that road that goes to Honore, it comes into the park, you know,
Right.
past the boats, the remote control boats, and it's around there. It's at the top, closer to Benderson, the lake.
Great.
They put it on a pole, a power pole, and they're
Cool.
sitting on eggs.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll get started. I'm glad you're all here. And this is a webinar, so you won't be able to talk, but you can answer if you have questions at any time during Scott's talk. Just pop it into the Q&A, which should be at the bottom of your screen. If you move your cursor, you'll see a Q&A with a question mark, and we will go through those questions after he's done. If you have any questions just for the group or for the panel, for me, you can put it in chat, but we're going to take questions through Q&A. Makes it easier for us. As time allows, Scott will address your questions at the end. So, got it? So I'm going to turn it over. Sarah Reisinger is just returning from out of town and has multiple kids playoff games tonight. So she's not going to be with us. And Catherine Young is going to tell us what's going on with Sarasota Audubon. So take it away, Catherine.
Okay. So there is a kids art day Saturday at the Nature Center, and they are going to build mobiles of safe nesting material for birds. And then the kids get to take them home and hang them in their yards.
So what time is that? Is that?
She didn't tell me a time.
I will find it.
Probably if you find it, we'll put it in the.
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat.
Chat. Okay. Then also at the Nature Center this Saturday is a garden cleanup day. And it's really great. We've been having a lot of these and having a few people volunteer. So wow, that's good. Also, let's see. Oh, we have the Christmas bird count coming up, and that's going to be December 28th. And we need a few more people. Erin Virgin is the coordinator for the Sarasota.
How do people find him?
So he has an email, and it's called eastendbirder@gmail.com.
I'll write it down.
We can put that in the comment corner also. eastendbirder@gmail.com if you want to volunteer to be on one of the teams, CBCs. I know I need another person at Celery Fields.
What day is that?
That is December 28th, a Saturday. Okay?
Yep.
All right. And then last but not least, the Smith Farm updates. Okay, since we last met, the Planning Commission had their meeting, and that was November 22nd, I believe. November 21st. And the Planning Commission only recommends to the county commissioners whether they think they should rezone the Smith Farm. So the Smith Farm is asking to go from a OUR, which is open use rural, to an RSF 2, which is residential.
And let's just explain for people who don't know what the Smith Farm is, because maybe we have some visitors.
Right. So first of all, the Smith Farm is on Raymond Road across from the celery fields. It's, if you look at a map, it looks like it's practically in the celery fields. We've measured it and it's like 100 feet from the boardwalk. They want to put 170 homes on the where the farm is. It's 49 acres. So it has to go through a rezone. You can't just sell a farm and put 170 homes on it. So the planning commission, which is really good, they voted 4-3 not to recommend a rezone. So that is one small step for us. The next step is going to be the Board of County Commissioners. And then we have to, we had like about, I'd say we had 200, 300 people at the last meeting, and about 50 people spoke. And I think we had over 700 emails that were sent in. So the Planning Commission knows that the community, the county, does not want 170 homes there. So we're thinking that the Board of County Commissioners is going to meet sometime in January. What we want you guys to do is, if you can, send in an email to commissioners@scgov.net. You can put that in the chat too, commissioners@scgov.net.
And you can get also, I think online, you can get the individual commissioners, and it's best if you write each individual commissioner instead of them all together, right, Catherine?
I didn't know, I never heard that, but yeah, you can get each
They'll
individual.
get it either way.
Okay.
You've done it either way, yeah. Well, they just, just to see how many emails they get is important. I
Yeah.
don't know if they read them all, but just like one sentence, how you feel. And that's what people did when they came to the planning commission meeting in Venice. They just really poured their hearts out for, 3, 4, 5 sentences, and it was powerful.
6-hour meeting.
Yep, and they didn't vote until like almost 11 at night, but it was so interesting and educational, because then they had to tell you why they were voting for a no rezone or why they weren't voting that way. So we got to hear, why they were voting the way they were voting. Yeah. Okay.
Can I just say one thing, Catherine?
Uh-huh.
Be aware that if you hear or keep track by coming to the celery fields online or our website, be aware that they could announce a meeting suddenly in January. And we really encourage everybody who can to come to Venice. Why Venice? Because I was amazed to find out that the commissioner's building in downtown Sarasota apparently was wrecked during the hurricanes, which off the record sounds kind of like they didn't take care of people's houses flooded, so they got flooded. But please come to Venice. It isn't that they're trying to make it hard for you to get there. There is no other place for us to meet now but in Venice.
It's right next to the Venice Rookery.
Yeah, so come
Building
and
is
do
right
the
next to
rookery and then come
Yeah.
and stay and tell the commissioners why we don't want the farm to become a development.
Yeah, we do want the farm, but we just don't want it to be rezoned to 171 homes.
Amen.
Amen. Okay. Take
All
it
right.
away.
Take it away, Margie, and introduce our esteemed speaker.
So the gentleman in orange with the lion about to munch on his head is actually Scott Harris, who's doing a talk for us called RaptorQuest. And Scott is a wildlife photographer, author, and speaker. And he's going to tell us all about his journey in the lower 48 to find all 53 of the raptors that call the lower 48 states home, plus a few other exotic, cool raptor type birds. So his journey took 17 months and more than 100,000 miles of travel across 34 states. So Scott is originally from California, where he had a syndicated newspaper column and 2 weekly radio shows. And it sounds like he also had really a full-time career as an award-winning and best-selling Western author. So he's a lifelong Westerners, or how do you say it? Cowboys and Indians and all those cool things. I'm a Western enthusiast who traces his love of Western fiction back to his childhood days of reading Louis L'Amour novels. So he's published 15 Western novels, along with multiple collections of short stories and a variety of other fiction and nonfiction Westerns. So he retired in 2020 to South Carolina and started to bird. I think when we move somewhere else and we get a little older, that's what happens. We all start to bird. So he says birding is a hobby he never imagined himself participating in, but now can't imagine living without. And I think we can all nod our heads and say yes to that. So take it away, Scott. We're looking forward to hearing you and seeing your lovely photos.
Well, thank you. And let's get the presentation up here and running. I think that would be helpful. All right. Are you seeing the cover of the book?
We are.
Okay. And just as an aside, with regards to your conversation about the farm and the housing, I spent my career doing that, working for a variety of clients on both sides. If you're going to send emails, send them individually to each commissioner. They don't really care what's in the email. They just do totals. So I don't know if you have a 5-commissioner board or whatever, but if you just copy and paste and add Julie and Fred and Jim and Joan or whoever they are, you'll get 5x for your money. And the other thing to be prepared is the commissioners are certainly going to be moved by your passion and your desire not to intrude on the celery fields and all those good things. But at some point, you're going to need to have somebody who can address the fact that you're impacting the owner of the land's opportunity to make livelihood on dirt that they own. And so that has to be addressed at some point if you have good commissioners, because you've got somebody that owns this dirt. And in essence, what you're asking them to do is to create a sanctuary that they pay for that you enjoy. And you need to address that to
Scott, we actually are taking care of them.
Perfect.
They're asking for this 170 homes crammed into too small a space. So we're asking for.
Perfect. And we probably don't want to get into this because that's not why you guys brought me on board. But just so you know, if negotiations happen, when they ask for 174, they're hoping for 125.
Right.
So in your mind, just if they have a decent firm representing them. Anyway, more exciting than that is birds.
Yes.
And I want to say thank you very much for you guys having me here tonight. These evenings are such a thrill for me, and I get to speak to people all over the country, which is really exciting. Tonight I get to speak to Sarasota, and tomorrow night is New Jersey, and Wednesday night I think is Oregon. And I get to hear them all talking about the local birds that they've seen and whatnot. And so it's really a cool deal, and I'm really excited about it. This book, RaptorQuest, this is my journey. It's my adventure. And the book and the photos that you'll see in it are a huge part of that. But as it turns out, even more important than the birds were the people that I met along the way. And I had a chance to meet some great people, and an awful lot of people went out of their way to help me with this quest. And that was a joy. This is, you guys all know this is a bald eagle. When my wife and I retired here, it's almost 5 years ago now, South Carolina, we bought a home on a lake. And interestingly enough, we bought the home without actually having ever been here or seen it. And so when we flew out to see what we bought, we were in the backyard with the real estate agent on the first day. And this bald eagle flew across the lake. We live on a lake, and landed on a tree, a pine tree, right on the water's edge on our property. And I thought that was a good sign. I thought that was an interesting sign. As was mentioned, I am not a longtime birder. I didn't start till I moved here, which is a little bit sad because my wife and I have been fortunate enough to be to all 50 states at least twice and probably 35 or 40 countries all before I started this adventure. And I would have loved to have been able to go back in time and either remember the birds I did see or search for birds that I could have seen. It was also mentioned that I'm a writer. I've published, I think, about 55 books in the last 7 years. This book, RaptorQuest, is the first one that is in the birding world. It is my way of expressing myself. I'm not a scientist or an ornithologist, so I tried to find a way to figure something out that I could write about in birds that would be interesting for me to write about and hopefully interesting for people to read about. And in 2011, this movie came out. Probably most, if not all of you saw it. I wasn't a birder, but I love all three of the actors, so I watched it. And then when we moved here right at the beginning of COVID, we watched the movie again, just as a family. And I thought, you know what, that's kind of a neat idea, the idea of a big year. But as it is with a lot of us, time and money and expertise maybe precludes us from doing that. So as I put more thought to it, I realized that there are 53 raptors that call the lower 48 home, and that seemed like a reasonable attack that I could go out and maybe find those 53 in a year. And I do love raptors. I mean, all birds are cool. I get that, but raptors are by far my favorite. It turned out to be a really big year because it took me 17 months, which was in large part due to my ignorance. The winter owls were much more difficult to get than I had known. And so I had to wait till another winter cycled around before I could do that. As I was doing my research, one of the things that I discovered is that while there are 53 raptors in the lower 48 states, there is not a generally accepted definition of raptor. You can find a generally accepted definition of bovine or canine or, families and genus and species and all that, but not of raptors. There are a variety of people that have proposed definitions, but not that have been universally accepted. And it reminds me back in 1964, Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart was asked if he could define pornography. And famously, he responded that he couldn't, but he knew it when he saw it. And I think that's the way it is for a lot of us with raptors. We know them when we see them. Is there controversy about these 53? There is. The biggest one is the three vultures, the turkey and the black and the California condor. I was blessed. I just flew in this morning on a red eye. I was out in California for a few days working on a different book, and I was in Pinnacles National Park and got to see 5 California condors. And if you haven't seen those things sweeping through the sky like a Boeing 747, they are truly, truly amazing to see. But in my opinion, they're not raptors, and they should be their own separate group. And there are a number of people that feel that way. There are always birds, as you guys know, being lumped and split. The one right now that's being talked about the most would be the Harlan's hawk, which is generally up in the northern third of the country and more west than anything else. There are subspecies of the red-tailed hawk, but they've been lumped and split already 3 times, and the rumors are they're going to be split out again. So if you're up in that area and you see a red tail, if you can discern that it's a Harlan subspecies, make sure you mark that down so that one day when they do split it, you'll wake up, and if you keep an eBird life list, you'll discover that you have an extra tick. There are some birds, I wonder if we really should count them. The hook-billed kite is more of an occasional visitor. It comes up from Mexico and crosses the border. There are a couple that breed here, which is one of the measuring sticks of whether it's a U.S. bird or not. But really, they're a Mexican and Central American bird. And then if you look at the north, you've got the northern hawk owl, the snowy, and the great gray owls. I would argue those are really Canadian birds, not U.S., but this is America, so we claim everything, and so we claim those. So this then is the breakdown of the 53 that I went after. This is the canvas that I used. I did not count Alaska and Hawaii. Alaska has no other birds unless there's a rarity that comes over the Bering Strait. But everything that can be found in Alaska can be found in the lower 48. And as far as Hawaii goes, they have barn owls, which we have. They have short-eared owls, which are also going to be split pretty soon. They're diurnal owls. They're very different than our short-eared owls here in the States. I had a chance to see them recently on a trip to Hawaii. And what I didn't see is the one endemic bird they have, or one endemic raptor, which is cleverly named the Hawaiian hawk. And I spent 3 days looking for that little devil and did not find it. But I will go back and I will find it because I would love to see that. But the 53 are here in the U.S. I've colored them all the states out, and that is because of the 53, 20 of them can be found in all 48 states. And I just think that's cool. Obviously, some of them are infrequent in some of the states, but you can find them in all 20 states. And if you're wondering, on a worldwide level, there are 3 raptors that can be found on 6 continents. There are no raptors, there are no birds at all that are found on all 7 continents. None of the birds are in Antarctica except for the penguins. So the 3 are the peregrine falcon, the osprey, and the barn owl. And those can be found in all 6 continents, which is kind of cool. 2 of our raptors have been found in 47 of the 48 states, and they have both skipped Louisiana. I don't know if they don't like Cajun food or don't like parishes, or I don't know what it is, but that's where they're not found. And that's the northern saw-whet owl and the northern goshawk, which is now the American goshawk. That's been split. Our goshawk and the European goshawk got split last year. So in the book, it'll say northern goshawk, but now in reality, it is the American goshawk. The snowy owl has only skipped 2 states, Arizona and New Mexico. It's been seen in the other 46. And by the way, so I'm clear, all of these statistics come from eBird, and all of them are based on the last 10 years. So, if you're looking at eBird and you're doing research, you can click current year, last 10, or forever. I figured 10 was pretty reasonable to use as a number. 5 of the raptors are typically found in 3 states or fewer: the Aplomata falcon, the ferruginous pygmy owl, the whiskered screech, the hook-billed kite, and the white-tailed kite. And interesting about those 5, the state where they are found most frequently is Texas. So Texas is a boon for people who love raptors. That's the distribution of raptors. This was the distribution of Scott. People have asked about my trip. I did 7 cross-country flights, and that was I did 7 cross-country drive trips. And those were predominantly to Montana, California, Texas, and Florida. I did multiple trips to some, and those were my driving trips, which was my preferred mode of travel. I also did a number of day trips and overnight trips over the course of the entire adventure. I did 13 round trip flights, which were 50 legs, and I'll tell you a story about that in a second. Although I had excellent luck with airlines. I was on the road for 25 weeks, not counting the overnighters. I visited 34 different states, and I traveled well over 100,000 miles. On the flights, I took about 50 legs. All 50 left on time, and 49 of them landed on time. So for all the talk people have about not doing well with airlines, I had great luck. And the one that landed late was going from Houston to Harlingen, Texas. I was going down to look for that hook-billed kite. It's my 4th trip down there to try to find that little devil. It was about 11:45 at night, and the captain comes on and he said, "Hey, we are over Harlingen, Texas." Excuse me. We are over Harlingen, Texas, but the bad news is it's very foggy. We're not sure if we can get under the fog and land. So we've got 15 minutes worth of fuel. So we're going to fly around for about 15 minutes. And if we can't land, we'll turn around and go back to Houston. Well, I'm not a pilot and I'm not a genius, but it took us 45 minutes to get from Houston to Harlingen, and only having 15 minutes worth of fuel seemed like a drawback. And a couple minutes later, the captain must have figured out what he had said, because he came back on and said, "What I meant to say was that we had 15 minutes worth of fuel to play with. We have plenty of fuel to get back to Houston," which is what we wound up doing. We stayed the night and got out the next morning, and I did get the hook billed. So that worked out well. On the driving, I did all of those trips, and all of the cross-country driving trips were by myself, and never had a problem, never had a flat tire, never had an issue with another motorist or another person. Everything was great. The only thing that didn't go 100%, these are the trips I drove to, and by the way, and these are the ones I flew, and those are the ones that I saw overall. The only thing that was a minor negative is I was up in Kalispell, Montana, looking for a snowy owl, which had been reported at a tiny little private airport called Flathead Lake Sky Ranch Airport. Pretty cool airport. Just a tiny little private airport surrounded by some really pretty homes and lots of roads. And a snowy owl had been reported for 3 or 4 days in a row. I got in on Monday. I went Monday afternoon. Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, I went each morning and each evening, and I never saw it. Friday morning, I thought I need a break from looking for this. So I knew that about 2.5 hours away, there's a great place for raptors. I'd been there before, and I'm just going to pop over there and spend a couple hours. So I did. And by the way, in 2 hours, not counting vultures, I saw 119 different raptors. It was spectacular. When it was done, I typed, I wanted to just get directions on my GPS to get me back to the airport to look for that owl one more time on Friday evening, because then I had to go to the real airport and catch a flight home. So I typed in Manning Road, which is the main road, runs parallel to the airport. And sure enough, it said 2.5 hours. I hit go, turned on my book on tape and started driving, just glancing down at the directions, but not really paying attention to where I was going. And I looked up and I was in a lot of traffic, and I realized that I was at the Canadian border, which meant I'd been going north, not east. And it turned out that there is a road in Alberta, Canada, Manning Road, that was also 2.5 hours from where I was. And I had accidentally hit that one. Not a big deal. It's a 100-yard round trip and come back into the States. But the Canadians did not believe that I was drug-free or gun-free or whatever. So they stripped my car down and spent 3 hours doing that. And I put it back together, went back over to the US side. They actually share a building, and the US side didn't believe me either. And so they spent 3 hours stripping my car down. I spent 6 hours at the border. I barely made it back to Kalispell with any light left after a long day at Border Patrol. And I pulled up, there was a car on the side of the road, and as birders know, that means it was either broken down or they were on a bird. I pulled up behind and I knocked on the guy's window and I said, "Any chance you're looking for that snowy owl?" And he pointed about 50 feet to his right, and there on a shed in somebody's backyard was this beautiful snowy owl. And it was absolutely a blessing. So I had at this point about 15 or 20 minutes of light. I got to watch the owl for that long, get some great shots. And as darkness fell, the owl took off to go do its night hunting, and I went to the airport, and it was a magnificent day. So this would have been the 120th raptor that I'd seen over the course of the day, and it was pretty cool. One of the, these are one-time sightings. These are the birds that I only saw one time in the course of the 17 months. The flammulated owl, by the way, I want to be clear, is the only one of the 53 that I did not see. That was a herd-only bird. I heard it 3 or 4 nights in a row in Rocky Mountain National Park, chased it through the forest in 0-degree temperature, and I was not able to get eyes on it, unfortunately. And I still have not seen one. So the others have all been, were all seen. Some of them were great shots, some were less than great, but the flam was the only herd only. And these are the 8 that I'd seen once. I've seen most of these again now since that, but that would have been the one time during the 17 months. Ferruginous pygmy owl, for those of you that might have gone after these before, they're not easy to get in the States. Down in Central America, they're fairly easy. I was just down in Costa Rica a little bit ago and saw a number of them, but here in the States, which was, I had to see them here to count it for the book. Turns out the best place to find this is King Ranch in Texas, which is a private ranch, and they do all kinds of stuff there. They have hunting cabins, and they raise cattle, and they do birding tours, and they have ferruginous pygmy owl. They're fairly well known for it. If you don't know King Ranch, it is massive. It is 825,000 acres, which makes it larger than the state of Rhode Island. I signed up to take their trip, and a young man about age 20 and his mom, both of them avid birders, came with me. I mean, we met there. We had a great guide named Tom Langshield, and we headed out to the ranch, and we saw probably 75 to 100 species over the course of the day, a couple of lifers. Early on, we heard a ferruginous. I didn't want to count it, but we did hear it. A little later on in the day, we saw one, but it wasn't a great look. It was a count, but not a great look. And about 10:30, we were settling in to have breakfast. It was a picnic table out in the middle of the ranch, in the middle of nowhere. And as I sat down on this picnic bench and I looked up about 20 feet away, there was this bird, just sitting there staring at us. We spent about a half an hour having breakfast. The bird never left. It just stayed there and stared at us. It preened, it was relaxed, it was comfortable. And when we were done having breakfast, we packed everything up, got in the van, and as we drove away, it flew away. I guess it thought breakfast was over. So that was a really cool thing. The other bird that I picked up on the ranch was a white-tailed hawk. And if you don't know, white-tailed hawks in Texas, their nickname is the fire hawk. And the reason for that is that when prairie fires roll through the prairies of Texas, not surprisingly, all of the insects that can take to the air in order to try and survive. And white-tailed hawks will simply fly behind the trailing edge of the smoke and wait until the insects, especially the grasshoppers, come out, and they can gorge themselves. And so the locals down there, the ranchers and whatnot, have watched this, and they've renamed the white-tailed hawk the fire hawk, which, by the way, would be a much cooler permanent name too. Spotted owl is not necessarily an easy bird to get on, and the young man that I mentioned that I met in Texas, I had told him about this book, and he said, "Hey, when you get around to looking for the spotted, if you have some trouble, give me a call." Last summer, he was studying at UC Davis to be an ornithologist. He said, my job for the summer was I worked for a timber company looking for spotted owl nests that I could mark so that they wouldn't cut down the timber around them, so the owls could take care of their family. And so when summer came around, I called him. He was generous enough to drive a little over 3 hours to the meeting place. And when we got there, we hiked up through a national forest about a mile or so, and it was dense forest. And he said, "Okay, we gotta turn in here and go maybe a quarter, maybe a third of a mile, and I'm pretty sure we'll find a nest." And I didn't see how we could get through. It was so thick. And he turned around and handed me a machete. We actually had to cut our way through the forest as we hiked in, and then we came to a clearing that was probably 40 feet square, and you are looking at the owl that was sitting there on a branch in the middle of this. And once again, Frank and I sat down. We'd hiked in with breakfast. It was probably 8:30 in the morning by now, and we sat down on 2 tree stumps, and we wound up staying an hour, and this bird never left. It dropped down once and caught a mouse and came back up. It preened, it took a little nap, it ate breakfast. And it gave us these shots so that we could get these pictures. And for me, I just thought it was a gift. I just thought it was magical, just like with the ferruginous. And I believe this is one of the reasons that I really, really love the Raptors, is there are occasions where you get a chance to sit and watch the birds like this. And you don't often get that, in the same way with warblers and hummingbirds. And not to place a value judgment on any of them, I certainly understand why people love those birds. But for me to be able to do this, or like when I was in California over the weekend I was actually working on a book about marine mammals. But up above us at one point, I was with a friend of mine who's an owl expert. He helped me I'll talk about him later in the conversation. But we looked up and there was a golden eagle and a red-tailed hawk was mobbing it. And we got to watch that for about 10 minutes. And so you had this perfectly blue sky. It was the middle of the day. There was nothing else around. And this golden eagle and the red-tailed hawk were doing a dance. And those are the moments that I look for. Those are the moments that I travel for. And that's the kind of thing, once I've seen it, I will never forget it. I'll be thinking about that forever. And it was a beautiful thing to see. I'm going to start processing all the photos tomorrow. And I can't wait to see what I might have gotten on that. So I'm pretty excited. Swallow-tailed kite, maybe the most elegant looking of all the raptors or of all the birds, is the first chapter in the book. And the reason for that is that my son and I were out on the lake here in the pontoon boat. We'd shut it down. We were just floating, having a cigar. It was the middle of the day. And we looked up, and 20 feet above our head, 2 swallowtails soared by. I was able to get this picture. And it just got me motivated and thinking about it. And I went back and thought about the movie, The Big Year. And by the time we got back to the dock, we had firmed up the idea for the book and come up with the name RaptorQuest. And it was pretty exciting. It was also the first time that swallowtails had been seen over the lake. The lake's 27 miles long. They don't normally come into this area. So that was a pretty special thing. So we made that the first chapter in the book. Rocky Mountain National Park, small owl banding project. This is a boreal owl that you're looking at. The gentleman that I mentioned, his name is Scott Rashid. That's who I just spent the last week in California with. He was a great help getting me on the small owls of Rocky Mountain National Park. That was where the flammulated was. You're looking at the boreal, the northern saw-whet, and I am embarrassed and I have forgotten the fourth, but I will think of it. But we spent days going through the park and looking for these owls, and then I came back again and worked with him on a banding project, which he's done every year for 25 or 26 years now in conjunction with the National Park Service. And he traps boreals and saw-whets and bands them and lets them go. And it's a pretty cool thing to be a part of that. This was the second boreal we caught in a night. The first time he'd ever caught two in a night. And he allowed me to hold it and release it, which once again, I felt privileged and blessed. But Scott is a fanatic. He spent more than a quarter of a century with probably 70% of his working life studying these four birds. So he knows more about them than just about anybody. And now the fourth bird is the northern pygmy owl, which is his favorite, which is a diurnal owl, by the way, not a nocturnal owl. And that is his absolute favorite. So great guy, great park if you haven't been to Rocky Mountain National Park, and a beautiful place to see owls. Commissary Ridge is a hawk watch and a banding station in Wyoming. And I was on the board of directors for a Raptor Center, and there was a woman there who worked for the center, and she left to go work for this hawk watch for the summer. And in order to do that, you have to be extremely committed. It is either 7 or 8 weeks. It is sunrise to sunset, 6.5 days a week. The half day is on Wednesday afternoon. They get to go down in town and take a shower and buy food because the camping is primitive. No running water, no electricity, no refrigeration. It is a wild way to live, and you've got to be committed to do that. Sit on top of this windswept hill and count raptors for 8 weeks straight. But she wanted to do it, and she did. And so I went to visit her. But the directions to get there were a little bit tough. I mean, I got from South Carolina to Wyoming fine, but I couldn't find the hawk watch / banding station. And those two places are about a half mile apart. I was driving around, and finally I saw the gate to a beautiful, beautiful ranch setup. So I let myself in, closed the gate behind me, drove about 3/4 of a mile down a road, and came up upon a stunning timber ranch house. And I knocked on the door, and this woman opened the door, and honestly, she could be anywhere from 50 to 150 years old. She couldn't have weighed 90 pounds. She looked like she was made out of leather, and she had this amazing, warm, inviting smile. And as soon as she opened the door, she looked at me and said, "Looking for the hawk watch?" And I said, "Yes, I am." She goes, "Everybody is." Because you want some water and a sandwich before you go, which I did. And we sat and talked for a few minutes, and she couldn't have been kinder. And apparently she's been doing this for years because for whatever reason, GPS just doesn't get you there. So if you're a visitor, a first-time visitor, you either give up or wind up at her ranch, appear to be the two places, because there's no cell service at the top. So you can't call and have somebody come down and meet you. But she did get me up on the ridge, and on the banding side, they let me release this sharp shin. So I got to hold it and release it, and it flew over to this branch, and then I got to photograph it. So that was really a cool thing all the way around. Red-tailed hawks, one of the few birds in the country, one of the few birds in the world that's just doing better and better and better every year. And the big reason for that, if you don't know it, is we owe a debt of gratitude to President Dwight D. Eisenhower. When he took over the presidency in the 1950s, one of the things that he wanted to do was to build an interstate highway system, which he started. It didn't end until 1994. Well, after his death was when it was finished, but he's the one that put it in motion. The unintended consequence of that, which nobody knew at the time, was that we built perfect red-tailed hawk habitat. We mowed the grass, let the moles and the voles and the small rodents and varmints love that for growing. And we put up these poles. We think they're power poles or telephone poles. Red-tailed hawks think they're perches. And they just sit up there and off they go. When my friend Scott and I drove from Monterey down to San Simeon, which isn't a terribly long drive, it's about a 2.5 hour drive, we counted over 200 red-tailed hawks on telephone poles as we went down there. I mean, it was just amazing. There were sometimes there'd be 3 or 4 telephone poles in a row with red-tailed hawks, which I think are maybe the prettiest of the raptors. But that was an absolute treat to get to see that. Peregrine falcons. This is a really cool story. We nearly lost them back in the 80s with DDT, but some good people came together and fought that, and we saved the falcons and the bald eagles and the brown pelicans. And peregrine falcons have now become city falcons, urban falcons. And the biggest 2 reasons for that are this. Peregrine falcons are cliff dwellers. That's where they make their nests. That's where they feel safe and in control and have great views. And what do we have in large cities? Skyscrapers, which to falcons apparently replicate cliffs. So every major city in the lower 48 states, regardless of where it sits in the weather pattern, has peregrine falcons. A city like New York City has breeding falcons at every single bridge coming into the city. So we were just up there a few months ago, my wife and I, and went and visited and got to see these peregrines. They are all over. The other reason they're there is they love pigeons. Pigeons are easy for them to catch, and they're numerous. They're obviously everywhere in big cities, and peregrine falcons do a great job of taking out pigeons and scaring away some of the others. Atlanta is the closest big city to me. It's about 3.5 hours away, and I got invited to go over there. They recently built a peregrine nesting box on the 50th floor of the Four Seasons Hotel, which is also their ballroom floor. So when somebody's having a bar mitzvah or a wedding or an anniversary party, and they open those drapes on the ballroom floor, they're going to be looking out at a nesting box. So when nesting season hits in March, I'll be back in contact with them and hoping against hope that we do get a pair of nesting falcons there. There have been falcons seen eating pigeons on top of the box, so they know the box is there, but we're going to wait and see if they nest. And if you want to see peregrines, probably, well, it's the opposite end of the country for you, but maybe the best place in the country to see them is Torrey Pines, which is right outside of San Diego. And Torrey Pines is a beach town, and they've got cliffs that go right down to the beach, and the falcons nest there, and you can see them there year round. They're just absolutely beautiful, absolutely beautiful. This bald eagle, obviously, this one is from Conowinga Dam. If you're not familiar with Conowinga Dam, it is in Maryland, about 45 minutes northeast of Baltimore. And right now, in November and December, the shad run up the river. And when they do, they go through the dam, the Conowinga Dam. And when they go through that dam, a large percentage of them get killed or knocked unconscious. And there will be 200, 300, 400 bald eagles there all day, every day, for a period of weeks. And you can see them picking the shad from the water. You can see them fighting each other, adults stealing from the juvenile and more experienced adults stealing from less experienced adults. It is magical. I've spent a number of days up there from sunrise to sunset. There's actually areas where you can sit up with chairs, and it's like a photography convention. Everybody's just watching the bald eagles. It is truly an amazing place. And much closer to you, excuse me, is a similar place, except for osprey, Sebastian Inlet, which is a little north of Vero Beach, other side of your state. And when the mullet run, which is generally in September, through this inlet, the ospreys gather by the dozens. And again, you can shoot them all day long, from sunrise to sunset. The ospreys are out there feasting on the mullets. You'll see them with one, you'll see them with two, you'll see them coming back constantly. They're remarkable. And osprey are a pretty amazing bird. There are things about them that are unique to all other raptors, and there are things about them that are unique to all other birds. As you guys know, they are sushi eaters, with rare exceptions. That is all they eat. They are the only migratory bird that carries a lunch with it. So as all migratory birds do, they fatten up as much as they can. Their organs shrink down or even disappear. They try to double their body weight. But the last thing an osprey does is grab one more fish, flip it around head first, which they always do, and then it takes off. If it's leaving Florida and flying across the Gulf, it'll just spend that flight flipping its neck down and eating this mullet or whatever the last fish they caught is. As I'm sure you guys know, more and more birds, more and more osprey are overwintering in Florida. Same thing's happening in Texas and California. But regardless of your political position, climate change is having an impact on animals, and birds are no exception to that. Osprey are the only migratory bird, not just the only raptor, but the only migratory bird that when it leaves at roughly 6 months old, the normal cycle is born in March or April, and then they leave in around September. They're the only bird in the world that stays not for 6 months where they're going, but for 18 months. For reasons that scientists and ornithologists have not been able to explain yet, ospreys skip that first year return. They stay for 18 months. There are a number of reasons that have been proposed, but none that have been accepted. And but at 18 months, they cycle back in and come right back. As most birds do, they come back to where they had left from, and this one does the same. And the other thing that's a little different about osprey is that its eyes adjust for refraction in the water, which no other raptor does. So a bald eagle, for example, is only a surface hunter because while it can see fish below the surface, it can't adjust for refraction, so it's unsuccessful in hunting them, so it gives up and learns to only go for surface. Osprey can dive 2.5 feet and adjust for refraction, which gives them a whole area of hunting that other raptors don't have. Great gray owl. This was a terrific get. It was in January in Yellowstone National Park. And if you haven't been to Yellowstone National Park in January, you got to try to make it. It's an amazing thing. I'm going again in 3 weeks. I try to go every January. This one was while I was writing the book. It was minus 25 degrees. If any of you are photographers, you know that when it's really cold, you cannot you can't have the heater on in the car or even have the windows up. Or when you open the door to get your shot, the camera fogs up. So I was out there by myself, minus 25 degrees, windows down, no heater. The snow was blowing so hard, I wound up with 1.5 inches of snow on my floorboards, but it was all worth it when I found this guy. And I was able to watch him for about 2 hours. I got to see him dive and hunt. And if you don't know, great gray owls are able to dive into snow. They can hear the small rodents underneath the snow. And this one I watched dive 3 times. And one of them, she dove so deep that she was completely out of sight. She had dove deeper than she was tall. It was really a spectacular thing to see. Rarities, there are rarities that show up. There's a caracara down in Florida. You guys have a yellow-headed on the east side. It's been there for a while. This was a bat falcon that showed up in Texas, very common in Central California, but this was a first in the U.S. and I got to see it in Texas. The Stellar Sea Eagle had shown up 2 winters in a row in Maine on the Arrowsick Bridge. It appeared to be heading back that way, but it's gone dark the last couple of weeks, so don't know if it just hasn't been seen or hopefully not, but maybe something happened to it. Nobody knows for sure. But if you haven't seen the Stellars, they are massive. They are about 50% bigger than a bald eagle. They're huge, huge birds. And it's fun. Not everybody twitches. Not everybody likes to chase rarities, but I will chase raptor rarities as often as I can. So those are fun to do. Northern hawk owl is on the cover of my book. It might have been recency bias. It was the last bird that I saw of the 53. And I found it in a town. I did not find it. Somebody else found it and got me close in Wise River, Montana. They just got me to the city, then I had to look around and find it. But when I did, I got to spend a whole morning with the bird. Again, probably 90 minutes. I was on a dirt road on one side. It was on a no longer used telephone pole on the other. And at the end of the 90 minutes, for whatever reason, it dropped off the pole, came across the road, and swept my blue jeans with its wing. I mean, it actually touched my calf with the blue jeans and then flew off into the field and settled into a bush. And for me, it was a spiritual moment. It was remarkable. I was by myself. It was cold. It was clear. It wasn't snowing. And I don't know why this hawk did that. I don't know why it touched me. It certainly didn't have to. And it certainly had seen me. It knew I was there, but for whatever reason it did. And that is why it wound up on the cover of the book. This is the cover. This is that same owl that you just saw, the northern hawk owl. And as I said, when I started, I've written more than 50 books, most of them Western, but children's books and business books and books of quotes. This one was different. This one was really, really special. And I had an absolutely fantastic time doing it. If you have an interest in buying it, you can go to my website, naturallyscott.com. If you don't have an interest in buying it, but you have an interest in seeing a lot of the photographs, go to the website. The photos are there. And there are some great photos. And I don't say that because I took them, just I was in the right place at the right time. And I've gotten to see some really cool things and was able to capture some of them with photos. This is a ferruginous hawk that I saw at Pinnacles National Park a couple of years ago, not the one just this past weekend. It is the only photo in the book, in this presentation, or on my website that I have doctored. The hawk is true. The beam that it's on is true. And the yellow on the sign is true. But in real life, that yellow reads high voltage, not thank you. But it's the end of the presentation, and I wanted to say thank you. So I played around with that just a little bit. And at this point, I am thrilled to answer any and all questions. And sincerely, thank you guys very much for having me. I hope that my enthusiasm for the birds and for birding and for people came through, because that's the highlight for me. And I love sharing it.
Awesome. Fascinating. We need questions.
Yeah.
I can make up answers with the best of them. So ask whatever.
Well, until people formulate their questions, I'd just like to say the photos are beautiful and
Oh, thank you.
they're really gorgeous. And maybe it's the way you talked about it, but the great hawk owl, I'm not so familiar with. Maybe that's a Western hawk, Western American hawk, but what a gorgeous bird it is.
Well, so just not to be nitpicky, but you threw two birds together. There's a great gray owl and a northern hawk owl.
Oh, I meant to, was that a great hawk owl, the one that's on your cover?
That's a northern hawk owl.
Oh, sorry.
That's a northern hawk owl. And so those are not very common. They're winter. We generally get them here, generally get to see them in the winter. Yellowstone National Park is a great place for that, which is why I'm going right after New Year's. I'm hoping to be able to find some this year. It is, they are stunning, stunning birds. I would argue that all birds are beautiful, from the LBJs, from the little brown jobs, on up to the most spectacular of the cranes and the raptors. And my wife and I were just a couple of months ago down in Africa. We saw 200 plus lifers and birds in colors that I don't even think Disney could come up with. So when I say raptors are my favorite, I truly mean my personal favorite, not that they're better or worse than anybody else's favorite birds.
So let me just, because I want to get to other people's questions, but the hawk on your book cover is the northern hawk owl.
Northern hawk owl.
And you saw it in Montana?
I saw it in Wise River, Montana. I had been in Montana to get a gyrfalcon. Those were my last two birds, the gyrfalcon and the northern hawk owl.
I'm going to Montana. Sorry. Bye.
I had been there only 3 days before I got the call that the northern hawk owl was there. And my wife, God bless her, she supports me in all of my hobbies and endeavors. And she had me on a plane within 12 hours. And the people up there were very protective of the bird. They were willing to tell me that the bird was in the Wise River City area, but that was it. They wouldn't tell me where. I don't know why. Either don't say anything at all or put me on the bird. But anyway, that's what happened. And I got fortunate enough to find it. And I
That's
found it
great.
2 days in a row.
So,
Yeah.
going to questions, how do you catch the hawks to band them? I don't know if you were doing that, but
I am not a bander. I've been at banding sites, but I'm not a bander. And generally there's 2 ways. You put up misting nets, and that works pretty well for the owls. And you'll use calls. It draws the birds in. The owls get caught in the net. You have to be there in an instant to take them out of the net so they don't panic and hurt themselves. I did that for about 5 nights in Colorado at Rocky Mountain National Park. And we caught a lot of owls. We caught other birds as well. Not a single bird was hurt. And we did not have a bird held captive for more than about 3 or 4 minutes. The guy that I was with is fanatical about that. You get it, you weigh it, you measure it, you sex it, and you send it free, and that's it. And so that's what we did. The other way to do it is with a live trap. So you take, it's a mound shape, if you will. If you cut a basketball in half, let's say, but it's much larger, and it has little fishing lines all over the top of it. And then underneath you put a mouse or a rat, and you tie that animal down under there, and the raptors will come in to think they've got a meal, and instead their legs get caught in that wire. It's not wire, it's fishing wire. But you've got to grab them quickly because they'll panic and they might hurt something. So I don't personally run banding stations, but I did visit a number of them as part of this project. And I understand the value and the science and everything that goes with it. I'm a little uncomfortable with it, but it's well past my input having any impact.
I'm with you on that. Scott Davidson, thanks you for your presentation. He is also a Scot, as he says, and he'd ask you to please repeat the 3 raptors found on 6 different continents.
Peregrine falcon, barn owl, and osprey. Those are our world travelers. And the reason it's not on 7 continents is none of them are in Antarctica. All we have down there are penguins.
Right.
So, and of course, we don't have penguins on the other 6 continents. So penguins have 1 continent to themselves. Peregrine, barn owls, and osprey take over the other 6.
And somebody wants to know, where did you photograph the lions?
I don't know exactly where that photo was taken because we split our time between Kenya and Tanzania, and we saw pretty much the same animals in both countries. So that one I think was early on, which would have put it in Tanzania, but it was Northeast Africa. And
So Donna Summers is asking, where did you see the great gray owl?
that was at Yellowstone National Park. I also saw them, if you get a chance, there's a place in Minnesota called Sax Zim Bog, and they have 7 different species of owls that show up depending on the winter. And great gray is one of them. I've seen them at Sax Zim. I was there 1 year, and just so you know, to bring at least a sweatshirt, it was minus 36 degrees. So it is a chilly place. So those are the only 2 places I've seen a great gray, Yellowstone and Sax Zim Bog.
And what was the dam you described for eagles eating the salmon, was it?
They're eating the shad, S-H-A-D.
Shad, right.
And it is the Conowingo Dam, Conowingo. It's on the Susquehanna River. It's 45 minutes northeast of Baltimore, Maryland. And it is literally a dam. I mean, it's an energy producing dam. And they have set up a really nice long walkway, and people will just line their chairs up because people are there all day. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to hike anywhere. It is just there. And so when I go, I bring a lounge chair and I set it up with my cameras, and I chat with the people that are on either side of me. had a little sack lunch, and snapped some pictures, hoping to get a good one.
And where in California do you see the bat falcon? I thought that was in Texas.
That
but-
was in Texas. If I said California, I misspoke. That was in Texas. It's only been seen once, according to eBird, ever in the US. And that was in southern Texas. It crossed over the border. It was seen every day for about 3 weeks, and then it disappeared. So whether it was predated by a great horned owl or flew back over the border to Mexico, because I mean, literally, it was a couple hundred yards from the border. Nobody knows what happened to it, but after about 3 weeks, it missed its first night and was never seen again.
Mm.
And the Stellar Seagull was in Maine. And both years it was there, it was there in February.
Did you see that bird?
I did, and it is
I'm
massive.
jealous.
Imagine the relationship between a bald eagle and a crow. That's the same physical relationship between a bald eagle and a stellar seagull, except in the opposite direction. They dwarf bald eagles.
Wow. And Lindsay McSweeney wants to know, what cameras do you use?
Lindsay, I'm glad you asked. I've been giving this presentation for about 2 years, and if you hadn't asked, you would have been the first group to not ask what cameras I use. That is always a question at some point in the presentation. So I carry 2 cameras. I carry a Sony A1 with a 200-600 lens. If people aren't familiar with it, it's a digital camera, shoots 30 frames a second at 50 megapixels. And then I also carry a Sony A9 with a 70-200 lens. And the reason I carry both, my wife says I'm carrying a pistol and a rifle, is because the A1 with the long lens is great for small birds that are far away and even mammals that are farther away. But like when we were down in Africa and literally lionesses are rubbing up against the Jeep when you're in it, you can't shoot that with a 200mm lens. You can just shoot like her shoulder. So I carry that to get things that were closer. Like when I was shooting this weekend, I was shooting whales and elephant seals. And sometimes the whales were so close that I couldn't get the whole whale in the frame. I had to back up to a 70-200. So that is why. I love the Sony, but honestly, I believe they're Ford and Chevy. I think the people who love Canons or Nikons are probably, those cameras are probably just as good as my camera. You'll find fanatics that want to argue there's a difference, 49 megapixels to 50 or 28 frames per second to 30. But in the end, I think they're all brilliantly engineered and they work well. I love the Sony, so that's what I go with.
I'm with you, babe.
There we go. And by the way, the reason for carrying both and not just switching lenses out is, so for example, on the trip to Africa, number one, things happen so fast, you might not have time to change the lens out. And number two, you don't want to be opening your camera up in an area where wind is blowing and dust is coming. And then like just this weekend, when I'm out on the ocean shooting whales and there's spray coming into the boat, you don't want to be opening your camera up then either and run the risk of getting spray inside there. So I'm not saying that it isn't a luxury, because it is, and I acknowledge that, but it is, you are quicker and safer by having both cameras.
So you're getting a lot of thanks among the questions. Fran
Everybody's
Alexander
welcome.
goes, wow, thank you. Scott Davidson says, thanks. Hope your next visit to Canada goes better. I gather that Scott Davidson is from Canada. I believe he said that before. So, and on behalf of all of us, I thank you so much for your presentation. I'm thinking about how to schedule my next visit to the California coast, the Rocky Mountain National Park, all these places. I can't wait to get there.
Well,
So
if you
thank
decide to
very
go
much.
to any of those, you're welcome to contact me. I would be more than happy to share some thoughts on where and when you might go.
You've
I'm
got a
actually,
deal there. I'll be contacting you.
I will look forward to hearing from you. Everybody have a great evening. Thank you so much for having me in. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I hope to get to speak to you guys again down the road, or even see you out in the fields, maybe the celery fields.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you
Take
so
care,
much.
everybody.
All right. Thanks.
All righty. So coming up, we have, next month, we also have a talk about hawks. Whoops, I'm just wanting to show you the book cover here. We have a naturalist and conservationist working to save the peregrine falcon, the Hawaiian crow, and the California condor. I can't recommend this book enough. It's Sophie Osborne, Feathered Trails. It's really, really a good read. And she talks about actually returning peregrine falcons to the wild, and also condors, and also about the Hawaiian hawk in addition. But it's really well written. And it's kind of amazing that women seem, in my opinion, especially well suited to do this kind of work of putting, you know, they hatch the peregrine falcons and then take them back into the wild. And women seem especially good at doing that. There are other women doing this. This is a great book. You might want to read it before she talks. I can't recommend it highly enough. So please join us next month. Next
On the
month.
9th of January. And
So-
we'll see you then.
Yes.
Good night, all.